Ravi, so nice of you to have come on my Dr. M's podcast, and you gave me the permission to call you Ravi. And I heard you first on Gerard's Virtual Lean Summit, and I was doing. I did present a paper over there, and but that was something that was totally on the lean continuous improvement side of it. And when I heard you, I was just glued on to you by saying that makes a lot of sense because that's a missing element in what we are doing. Because for us, this movement, to me, it is a human resource movement, right? Whatever you do, it's a human. You have the machines and everything else that is supportive, but unless you get people involved. So when I saw your presentation, I said, I need to have you around and talk to you because this what I have started is in the month of September last year because of the pandemic. And so since I was 25 years, 30 years into continuous improvement, working at the shop side, etc., I've seen things bloom up very well and then it stagnates and then it goes down. So I was trying to find out how to support and sustain it. That's where I come from. And your inputs is very vital for us. And thank God. Just let me do my standard work of introducing my guest. So here we go. Invariably, I get the last slide first, but this time let me see if I'm lucky. I told you I will not be. I always get the last slide first. So there we are. You're on Dr. M's podcast, and I said you're on the 29th episode. I started in September. It's more of a support and sustaining the continuous improvement process, irrespective of whether you take the Six Sigma way or lean way, or you make change management, call it by whatever it is. I have seen it stagnate and what we call it flatlined, and then how do you sustain it, scaffolding it, and take it forward. And when I heard you speak at Gerard's thing, I said, what is missing is the human involvement. How do you get the people involved in the total movement as such? And yes, we would talk about what people are talking about, toxicity, etc., etc., etc. And you did mention how that a single incidence can affect a lot of things that you just talk about it in the workplace. It doesn't mean that you leave it at the gate when you go out. You carry it along with you. And that creates its own issues. The best, I mean, you're the best judge of that. I mean, so this is what really attracted me when you did the presentation of the link of human beings. I'm sure you would talk about this and what's the connect with this photograph or this image, which is, I think, it is an image, right? It's an MRI image, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the book that you have written, and I'm going to get it on Sunday, and I think I'm going to digest it, understand it, whatever, and then once I do that, Ravi, I'm not taking you out of my net. You'll be always around my net. Okay, so actually, you asked for trouble when you said that you can ask me any queries after the presentation. I said, of course, I'll catch Ravi. So you are there from Johns Hopkins University, PhD in child health, and the University of Virginia School of Medicine, MD. And this is what you said, that at the age of 29, you had two doctoral work, doctoral as an MD and a PhD. That's remarkable. I mean, we can talk about it because when I was 29, I didn't know whether I was, which was north or which was east, and I don't know. Thank you very much. It's great. And this is what is a blessing for us who are in the industry, that you did your medical training research in Johns Hopkins and Harvard, but then you left your clinical services and then came as a management consultant and a speaker. We are really blessed that if you could solve these issues for us, we can do a lot of things technically, we can talk brag about how to bring down the cycle time, blah, 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 blah. But this element is something that I find that is missing. And you are God sent to us. So, and you're across 5 continents. When was the last time you visited India?
Oh, the last time I was in India was 2011,
2011. Which part
so
of
quite a
India were
while
you?
now.
Which part of India?
Although we've all lost 2, 3 years now of traveling
Yeah,
because of the pandemic. Where was I? I was in Mumbai then
I'm
in
in
2000.
Mumbai. I'm in Mumbai. So I'm straight away inviting you. Come over to Mumbai once more.
Oh, I'd be happy to. So my parents originally are from the state of Karnataka,
Mm,
and my dad was essentially lived his whole life in Karnataka. My mom spent part of her life in Bengaluru, but also then spent much of her life in Chennai.
mm,
And so they both became immigrants to the US in 1972 or 73.
mm.
And my sister and I were raised in the US.
Yep. You know, I spent a good part of my time, 16 years in Bangalore.
Oh,
Bangalore. I was working for Hindustan in aeronautics, aviation industry.
okay.
So I can speak Kannada. I can speak about 7 languages. Now I'm not going to say anything about myself because I'm feeling like a pygmy in front of you. With
What?
so I'm
No.
not even going to tell you what PhD I did in. Okay, so just forget me. Okay, so so I can speak. I was in Karnataka for quite some time, and then I belong to Kerala, uh, way down on the west coast, down there in
Okay.
Kerala. My parents come from there. I was born over there, but brought up in the north, and and now settled down in Bangalore. Sorry, in Mumbai, and hopefully, coming months, I'll go back to the Gamba. So this was more of a default, but this has given me a lot of insight as to what people do across the world in my domain area. And you're the first person who's going to talk to me about this part of the this part of the process which we are really lacking into or we are not really focusing on. So it'll be a great input that would go, and I'm going to publish it tomorrow itself. So it must be around in the morning time over there. And I believe it was very heavy showers yesterday in Chicago.
Well, in Chicago, the joke always is if you don't like the weather, wait 1 hour, it will change.
So, so there you are. That's what really attracted me. And how do you get this two things involved, emotional business?
Yeah, my 20s were spent studying the brain and studying MRI images and understanding things like how does the brain change after a car crash and what kinds of structures are impacted. And I spent a lot of time learning about all the intricacies of the anatomy of the brain. That was my focus,
Mhm.
very, very specific focus
Mm,
for a number of years,
mm,
as you noted in terms of my introduction. The the thing that I found perhaps the biggest insight I got during that decade of time was that even though we say things like, oh, I feel in my heart,
mm,
and oh, he has such a good heart,
mm,
and oh, when you left me, you broke my heart.
mm,
Uh, the biggest insight for me was that emotion doesn't happen in the heart.
mm,
Even though we say this in our language, emotion doesn't happen in the chest. The
mm,
heart is a pump that gets oxygenated blood to the organs of the body.
mm.
But everything that we experience as human beings,
mm,
both the positive things like love and connection to people,
mm,
but also the difficulties, the
mm,
sadness, the anxieties, the
mm,
rage,
mm,
the terror,
mm,
all of those,
mm,
uh, they don't happen in the heart, they
mm,
happen in the brain. And as we start to really understand where they happen in the brain and
mm,
how much of the brain is actually devoted to this emotional awareness,
mm,
you know, we typically think of the brain as, oh, that's the place of cognition. That's the place where we invent democracy and
mm,
calculus and come up with all these intellectual insights.
mm,
That's true.
mm,
But the brain is a very emotional space. In
mm,
fact, human emotion is centered in
mm,
the brain. I remember it was 2006,
mm,
and I was talking to a leader at a client organization, and he said, "You know, I wish we used our heart more around here."
mm,
And I said, "What do you mean?"
mm,
And he said, "Well, you know, we deal with numbers and facts and data,
mm,
but I wish we considered the human element more."
mm,
And I started to laugh at him.
mm,
And he goes, "Why are you laughing? I'm being very serious about something important." I
mm,
said, "No, no, I totally agree with what you're saying. I just think it's funny that you think it happens in the heart.
mm,
You know, it doesn't happen here. It happens up here."
mm,
And the beautiful thing about the fact that emotion happens in the brain is, like everything else that happens in the brain,
mm,
it can be learned.
mm,
It can be reflected upon.
mm,
It can become better.
mm,
And so when we start to say, you know what, if I'm not good at speaking Telugu, I can practice speaking Telugu.
mm,
If I'm not really good at doing some manual thing with my hands, such as, you know, cooking or something with fine motor, I can practice and get better,
mm,
because that's how the brain is. You practice, it
mm,
gets better. And the beautiful thing is emotion happening here, if we learn to reflect, practice, use different forms of language, use different ways of expressing the same idea, and then listening differently and changing our behavior about how we actually interact with people, the brain gets better at it.
mm. Ravi,
And so
since
the
you,
idea is you can go walk into an organization and you can improve processes, you can improve metrics, you can improve data, you can improve all those things. But guess what? You can also improve culture by teaching people's brains how to be better at all the things that are emotional. In a way, we become so sophisticated at engineering and process redesign and all these things, but we often have never even done one bit of growth on the emotional things. We were improving and getting better at emotions up until about the age of 6, and then we just sort of stop. And now we can start to reflect, especially given how much we know now from the neuroscience of emotion. We can start to say, hey, how do I get better at that? How do I get better at leading, at sustaining change, at inspiring and motivating a group to join in the journey? Those are things that can be taught. Those are skills that people can learn. And so that's what I've spent the last 17 years now
so
doing.
Ravi, since you gave me this free way to ask whatever I want to, so let
Yeah.
me first ask you whatever is in my first thought. Look, one of the things that we say, I'm going to say it in one sentence, right? Because you Googled me, I mean, you played tricks with my brain when you started saying 4 toes, 10 toes, etc. I said, what the hell is happening over there? I couldn't figure out anything, to be very frank. You remember those? You gave a puzzle over there, 4 toes, 5 toes,
Oh,
and
yeah.
all it
Right.
is.
Right.
I
Yeah.
couldn't
Yeah.
figure out nothing in that. And then somebody gave me an answer for that. I said, oh, now that you're giving me the answer, I can join the dots. Otherwise, I could never do that. Okay, what I'm going to ask you is this. You talk about employee engagement, employee empowerment, all that. So here is what I learned a long time ago, and this is what I want you to explain to me. Uh, and I'm going to say it very slowly. It says, where you matter, you belong, and where you belong, you contribute. Where you don't matter, you don't belong. So there you just where you don't belong, you just transact. I mean, you transact at the level of punishment avoidance, level of functioning. So there are two parts of it. How do you bring in the sense of mattering? So I don't know whether this is theoretically correct, but this is what we have been saying, that where you matter, you belong, and where you belong, you contribute. Where you don't belong, you just play at the level of punishment avoidance. You just transact. That's what is required. Now, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I mean, the layer I would add to the description is that we can now, in the last 10, 20 years, start to describe which parts of the brain make that happen. We now understand that the brain has this capacity to connect. It has this capacity to make one feel part of something greater than yourself. But at the same time, if that's absent, we go purely into the kind of primitive fight or flight. We go into this, oh, this guy, he's an enemy of mine. This guy, he's an enemy of mine. And we start acting as though everyone is out to get us. And we're in this kind of, we go into work with hostility, and we go into work with defensiveness because we don't know who's going to backstab us today. When we get to that point where we walk into a workplace and our physiology is actually already getting us ready for war, that's problematic. There's no way that systems work. There's no way that collaboration happens. It's almost impossible to innovate because everyone is worried about themselves and their safety and their survival. Now, there are solutions to that. It starts with the leadership and the organizational hierarchy saying, you know, we're going to commit to making people feel great here. And when we do that, and there's a variety of ways to do that, but when we do that, we bring out the best in people.
So
we let them feel like they matter.
Yeah, the follow-up question is, because I never planned for this sort of interactions. I thought we would be talking. How do you build in a sense of mattering in an organization?
So it happens both at a collective level and it happens at an individual level. The collective level, my word for it is the emotional strategy of the organization, is to say, this is how we let people know we are connected to them. And over 17 years of doing this now, I have sort of identified there's 9 big strategies, and organizations have to pick which one or which 2 of the 9 they're going to most focus on. And those are things like gratitude, inspiration, friendship. What is the DNA of the organization is not only what KPIs are we measuring and what's our supply chain, but also how do we expect that we will achieve great results by having people be connected to each other. There's a way to do it. There are many ways to do it, I should say. And we have to pick in our organization which way to do it. And that's the kind of collective level. The second part of it, though, is equally important, is managers have to take on the mindset that their role is to create the conditions for the front line to succeed. If the manager takes the mindset of, oh, these terrible frontline workers, these lazy, good-for-nothing people who make my life hard, if that's the mindset of the manager and it's a punitive mindset, they may get little bursts of performance under deadlines, but those workers go home and hate their manager. There's an old phrase in organizational development work. People join a company and they leave their manager. So there's the collective strategy on one level, but then there's the what type of people are we in the company promoting to become managers? And this is a very hard thing for people to accept. You may have an outstanding frontline associate who's doing a remarkable job, who you want to incentivize with more pay, with greater opportunities, and so on, to stay with the organization. That does not necessarily mean they should be a manager, because the skills that it requires to lead others are not necessarily the same as being an excellent individual performer. And I've seen plenty of people who were excellent individual performers put into a manager role and failed miserably. And the reverse, people who were, acceptable somewhere in the middle of the crowd as individual workers, but when they got to be the leader of others, they shined. And so we have to ask more and more, how do we find, identify, and really cultivate that managerial skill where the manager is the reason people want to stay with the company as opposed to the reason they leave it.
So I'm talking now about the managerial segment of it. Okay. Now that you have steered it, I got plenty of questions, but then I can't take all of your time. But you're going to come back on my episode again after I read your book. That's what you have to give me in return. Okay. Is that the deal? Promise, done. Okay. So what I'm saying is, where I'm coming from, having done, now I have to say in what PhD I did. So it's that I did a impact of national culture on work commitment and organizational commitment. It was a cross country study between Indian managers and German managers, where we went through. And one of the things, without getting into details, is if there's a part distance, like what you have in the East, where there's a greater part distance, like even in India. I mean, you don't. I know my generation that I used to talk to my father through my mother. Okay, the part distance was high. I could not talk to him directly, and the touching the feet, and okay, that's a part of a ritual. But then even the communication, there's a part distance that it. And in India, most of the companies are owned by families. Okay, nearly 98% are there. So the value of that gentleman flows down the organization. So the part distance is high. And the way that's what but as you go west, the part distance reduces. Even this millennium kids that are coming in, the part distance is far lesser. Like my son would talk to me like a friend. Okay. That's a totally different thing. But in an organization, when there's a part distance, I mean, there is the leaders, the managers who find themselves very vulnerable. I don't know, they do find, and since I moved up from a supervisor level to a position of a director, I know per se that I would feel vulnerable of saying that I don't know. And one of the things that I'm tracking through this thing is the technological curve is taking an exponential curve, right? It's going way beyond. But the organization is going on a logarithmic rate. So the gap between that is, I'm trying to find out from various people how to bridge it. One of the things that I'm trying to find out, and you would be the right person to bounce that idea, is you're getting the young millennials inside. Okay, the young guys who, like my kid who is 29 years old, and he would talk to me like using all the F words and all this, all acceptable to me. Okay, that's a totally different thing, but it may not be. So one of the things that we were talking is that there would be a concept of reverse mentoring, that people have to come down and understand the technology from the youngsters.
Yeah.
So,
which is very, very hard, because we grow up with the sense of, okay, I understand the path, and when I get to be a manager, then people should respect me. And it can be very, very tough. There's again, another kind of classic proverb, not mine, that says respect is a two-way street. So if you expect to get respect, you have to be able to give respect.
Mm,
And that can be hard, especially as you say, in certain cultures where respect only flows upwards to the hierarchy.
mm,
Um, and it is a different mindset to say, we have to respect both directions. Yes, the manager still is going to set the direction and is going to say, this is what we're going to do, and puts out the vision and has to be held accountable, and also then get the support of the workers. But again, and I think this is shifting anyway without massive effort. The millennials are saying, you know what, I don't want to work in a place where the boss is just angry and yelling all the time. If they encounter that, they move elsewhere, they go elsewhere. And it is part of employee retention to
mm.
actually have a livable workplace, to be somewhere where people want to be. I think the other challenge is by generations is the millennials are excellent with their phones and the technology, but
True.
they've had less experience dealing with people. So when they have to do customer service, when they have to do sales, when they have to do management, they're actually less prepared for that than prior generations. Even something as simple I've observed is having a verbal conversation for a millennial can be very awkward because they are used to texting. Hey, can I just text them? Hey, can I just text them? I remember once I got a phone call and I apologized and I said to a young millennial, let me just grab this real fast. I said, oh, hello, this is Ravi. And then I had a quick 30-second exchange and I said, okay, I'll talk to you later. And it was a work-related call. And the millennial said to me, why did that person call you? And I said, oh, just to touch base and to make sure we were okay for this upcoming issue. And they said, yeah, but why didn't they just text you? Well, and I said, with texting, it's hard to know, are they upset? Are they anxious? Are they angry? Are they comfortable? What is their state? You can't pull all that out just from the words. And the millennial said something like, it would be considered rude almost in my peer group if we called for something that could be sent by a text.
Mm.
And so it's interesting when they then are told, okay, have a conversation with the client or with the customer, or when they're told, oh, there's an issue in the team, talk with each other, becomes, oh, we don't do that. Can we just send a text? So there are advantages to being in an older generation that had, didn't have all the phones and texting and so on. It's interesting, visual information, does not convey emotion as well. I mean, visual information meaning just text itself. You cannot tell, is the person upset? You don't know what the context is. How, if they were to say it out loud, are they saying it with anger? Are they saying it with anxiety? You can't read that when you just see the letters typed out. And so if there is a risk of anger, if there's a risk of anxiety, if there's a risk of misinterpretation, I always pick up the phone. Millennials won't necessarily. So to also understand, to bridge that gap can be tough. You talked about the technological growth is happening so much faster than the organizational growth. Yeah, I think you see that the most in the millennials because their ability to pick up and see new social media trends, new technology, new features on their phones, new features on their tablets, they're amazingly able to just suddenly transfer new skills that way. But if you then ask them to, describe that in a conversation with a customer or a conversation with a colleague, their basic skill set there may be less because they just haven't had to do it every day as people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s had to do growing up without the technology.
I'm just keeping you still on the upper part of the upper part of the hemisphere of the organization. So how does a leader come down and ask these guys that I don't know these technologies, So please tell me how do they build up that sort of a emotional bonding with these youngsters?
Yeah, a little bit of that is cultural in that the way that someone in England would ask for that is going to be different than Germany or India or Australia. They're each going to have their own peculiarities. You know, for me, I think humility always comes across well. So in some cultures it won't, but I think in most places it's okay for the leader to say, hey, this is an area I'm not familiar with, so I would really value your input. Or, hey, I'm not as much up to speed on this. Can you suggest some resources that I can go and become more fluent in this? And the millennials will be like, oh yeah, you should read this book, or you should watch this YouTube video, or you should do this thing for practice, or you should get this app. They're pretty good about that, and it won't come with a lack of respect, or it won't come with criticism because they don't know. I think if you do it with humility, in most cultures that is perceived well. Now, historically, it wouldn't have been. Historically, if you show any a bit of humility as a leader, people would be like, "Oh, well, how weak! You know, it shows humility. It should show strength." You know, but I think we've evolved as a civilization, as a human civilization. We understand now that when a leader can actually say, like, I don't know this, or I'm not sure what to do here, or this is new for me as well. I think people will respect the honesty and the transparency more than they may have, let's say, in 1950.
That was the year I was born. Okay. Ravi, I'm still not going at taking you on the lower hemisphere. I'm still keeping you on the upper hemisphere of the pyramid. Now, where I'm coming from is this. Is it possible for you to share a case study without naming an organization where the leaders really went about and displayed humility? Because people should understand what humility means.
Yeah, I
Any
would
case
say
study,
that.
since you have
I would,
hands-on on that.
yeah, what's interesting is when you ask that question, my internal response about the organizations I work with is they all the successful organizations have leaders showing humility. If I walk into a place and I see kind of angry, aggressive, big bossy leader types screaming things at people, they're not a successful organization. But if you pick any organization and say, oh, well, they're the tops in that field, I tend to, at least from what I've seen, and again, across the world in so many different continents, whether it's South America, Europe, Asia, Australia, it doesn't matter. There is a common thread in today's climate. I'm not talking about 1970, but in today's climate, that if you are successful, it's because the leaders, the managers have shown the ability to create an organizational culture where people flourish. One of the skills that I think is pervasive in many organizations, and I'll be specific here as an example, particularly in organizations that have something driven by innovation, tech companies, entertainment companies, companies where there's a seasonal innovation like fashion, all of which I've served in terms of working with clients in those industries. What's interesting is the thing that doesn't work is rigidity. So if I'm in entertainment or fashion or tech, and I say it must be this way, and it must be this way at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, every Tuesday, it doesn't meet the needs of the clients, the customers, and the broader marketplace. So there's a degree to which there's an understanding that circumstances change and flexibility has to be set into things. Now, I don't do as much work with kind of industries that are 200 years old and have a kind of set manufacturing schedule, but even then, the Lean Six Sigma community has taught me there is so much to improve in the manufacturing space. So I don't think that any organization is just done because we did it this way in 1910. We should keep doing it that way. The manager behavior that I think becomes the most critical, that yeah, and I'm saying this a little bit based on many clients fused together, but the manager behavior that I think becomes most critical is the concept that the manager is not punitive. If you walk in as the manager and everyone fears you, they may perform, but they'll never excel. They may deliver, but they'll never shine. People, when they really put out extraordinary results, it's always for a manager that they love. And the only way they're going to love the manager is if somehow that manager has conveyed the sense of, I want you to succeed. I want you to excel, and I want you to take the credit for that. If the manager is a bully who just smacks them with a ruler and scolds them like a bully, like I said, they'll get some short-term results out of that on a particular day or a particular month, but they're not getting loyalty, and they're certainly never going to get above average. So now, how does the manager do that? Well, it's 1,000 small things. It's not one big thing. It's 1,000 small things. Like, one of the techniques that I teach managers when I'm working with an organization is the concept of the drive-by compliment. In usual settings, if you're going to say something nice to someone, it has to be as part of a formal evaluation process. And you sit there and say, okay, here are 6 things you did well, but here are 4 things you need to correct. And people in general don't want that. Yes, for formal evaluation, they need to know why they're getting a particular rating. But one thing that inspires people to love their manager is the idea that the manager is just walking by. I call it drive-by, but it's essentially the manager just walks by, sees someone do something great, and just says, I love what you're doing there. Keep it up. Or, hey, you did great in that meeting. And not offer any negative. Just tell them, great job, and go and leave. Don't linger, just come in, deliver something positive like a little boost, and go. And people will sort of be shocked, because how many times in regular life do you ever have somebody just say something nice and walk away? If I'll tell you, I think many people have had this experience. You're just walking down the street, or you're walking in a store or in a shop, and someone just says, I love your jacket, or I love your glasses, or, oh, where did you get that particular item? And it's sort of, you remember it because it makes you feel this kind of excitement for a moment. And when a manager can do that for anyone that they're managing, they start to feel those things on a regular basis. That will inspire even greater performance and productivity and innovation and whatever else. So just small techniques like that, and there are thousands of them. But or
Give me
moments
5. I don't want 1,000. Just give me 5.
Yeah.
Just one. Driving by compliments, that is say, and you can't fake it, right? People can see through you.
I mean, and to be honest, if you are a bully and you don't have the right demeanor, the right tone, the right actual belief in wanting to give something nice to the person, and you walk by in your grumbly state and say, hey, that was good, and you walk away, even if the words are the right words, the emotion is not right. And people will be like confused and be like, what was that? And it won't deliver the effect. It's not just the words, it's the entire delivery. There are other things that managers can do, on a daily basis that may seem small, even insignificant, but mean a tremendous amount to workers. Another one is just saying thank you. Sometimes a worker will do their job. Yes, they get their paycheck, but then you ask them, why are you struggling? And they'll say, I put in so much for this company, and I know I should be feeling lucky just to have a job. But even then, as a human, with these emotional things going on in my brain, I want someone to just sometimes say, thank you for doing that. Especially if it's beyond my job description, beyond the normal, and I put in the extra effort. And if the manager just says, that's what you're supposed to do, it feels like you're somehow unrecognized, that your extra effort wasn't appreciated. I learned from a company that I worked with, which was a real estate company. They build office buildings and housing. One of the executives there said to me, appreciation has two meanings. Appreciation can mean to recognize, like, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. But in real estate, appreciation also means to increase in value. And when you take the time as a manager to do small things like the compliment unsolicited, just to say something nice, or when you point out what was really great about what somebody did, you're doing both to a human being. You're recognizing them, but you're also helping them to increase in value over time. So sometimes just saying thank you is the real boost to productivity, more than an incentive, more than some financial bonus. Sometimes people will give you more than you ever thought they would, simply because they are feeling recognized and appreciated. And the opposite is also true. They walk in and they say, this boss doesn't know how hard I work, doesn't care whether I work this hard. Well, if they don't care about me, I'm not going to care about them. Frankly, I think I can make more money across town at the competitor. I'm going to go there.
Ravi, you know what? You use the word manager. And what I liked about it, and I'm just observing the way I'm listening to you and hearing it with my, and just putting it into frame of what. When you say manager, irrespective of whether the person is an immediate colleague of yours, a subordinate of yours, or your boss, whatever it is, irrespective whether you're from production department or not, there's driving by compliment, driving by appreciation. It need not be your immediate colleagues or whatever it is. It is any human being that you meet in the organization and you do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, you could be, like you said, as you just noted, you could be from a totally different department and just walking by and you give somebody a positive compliment about something or an encouraging word about something. And people will be like, who is that guy? Who's Mr. Parmeswaran? Why did he come by my department? Why did he say something nice? And people will even remember that. Again, I love these quotes from different sources. One of my favorite quotes is a quote from writer and performer American Maya Angelou. She's now deceased, but one of her favorite quotes that she would say often when she was interviewed was, people will forget what you say. People will forget what you do. People never forget how you make them feel.
Okay, Ravi, I'm going to take it to the lower hemisphere. How do people at a junior position, what have you, or in a reporting place where they have the leaders whose behavior they cannot control, but how do they absorb atmosphere of what they call toxicity or whatever you want to name it? You may not get compliments, you may not get anything, but then you have to deal with it. How do they deal with it as human beings?
Yeah. Well, this is one of the critical questions of our time, because all over the world, most business schools and most management courses and even the markets themselves are only interested in results and numbers. And so the managers, the leaders, the organization has not tended to focus on emotion. They are just worried about the numbers. And it leaves every frontline worker feeling, oh, it doesn't, I don't matter. What's interesting to me about the nature, again, going back to the early part of the conversation with the brain, there's a lot of emotion in the brain. And why I say that again as a kind of repetitive statement is you can't stop your emotions. People say, oh, don't bring your emotions into the workplace, or check your emotions at the door. Just come in and perform like a robot. I'll say this as an expert in the brain. You can't do it. There's no way to sort of stop your brain from being emotional. Now, you may create other emotions. You may tell yourself, okay, calm down, calm down, calm down. Or just take a deep breath and, grit your teeth and endure through this boss. But the emotion doesn't go away. Now, you can develop some degree of immunity against it if you build up a tolerance to it. But the reality is humans are emotional. And you're going to feel those things. And I never criticize someone for feeling anxiety or sadness or frustration or disappointment in the workplace. Yeah, it happens every day to billions of people, frankly. The thing that I always encourage everybody to recognize is emotion is the human survival mechanism. What I mean by that is the elephant is bigger. The lion and the cheetah are faster. The giraffe is taller and can see the threats coming from farther away. But the thing that the humans do is we organize better. We collectively work better. Our only way of surviving is if I don't know something, I literally can call someone in Mumbai who might know the answer. People will always say, like, oh, humans are smart. That's how we've survived. I'm not so sure, because even with intelligence, an individual human is easily overpowered by a lion or one of these other predators. But it's the human ability to form groups. And since the earliest days of humans, we form groups. We form families, we form tribes, we form communities, we form societies. Everywhere you look, humans form groups. And the same has to be true in the workplace around emotions. I have seen huge improvements in companies when simply they create employee resource groups. It's called different things in different cultures, but it's just the idea of like, hey, everybody who has a particular interest or everybody who has a particular challenge, it could be disabled employees, those in wheelchairs, or it could be any number of things. It could be employees over 50. Whoever's in the group has that sense of, I'm not in this alone. And then they'll tell each other stories about, oh, my boss said this to me, and others will laugh and say, oh, my boss said that to me too. And these kinds of ways of finding connection. You know what the number one way that companies kill emotional connection is? To tell employees that if they have a problem, it's their problem, and nobody else has that except them. Oh, they're the one weirdo out of the 70,000 employees who thinks that. And that's never the case, right? It's always collectively many other people are feeling the same thing. I can remember a specific case where I was working at a company in the rental car industry in the US. And I spoke to a young woman in her 20s. And she was out one day, and I happened to see her 2 days later and said, oh, I didn't see you earlier in the week. Were you out? And she goes, oh, yeah, one of my parents died. And I said, I'm so sorry. And I said, Have people been supportive? You came back so fast. It's just you were gone only 1 or 2 days. And she goes, oh, I am not telling anybody here. And I said, you're not telling anyone that you lost a parent? And she goes, they're not going to be supportive. They're going to use it against me, or they're going to think I can't do the job. And so when we get to that point where people feel like they're on their own for even these huge life events, it's very, very problematic. What's interesting is, particularly in Europe, I don't know why specifically only or more so in Europe, but the pandemic created a different kind of conversation between workers.
Mhm.
Because I would have said 10 years ago, I didn't really hear that much of European workers talking about their personal life at the office.
Mhm.
Like if I was in France or England or Sweden, and I've been to all those places frequently, it's just not very common for a worker to come in on Monday in Sweden and say, oh, on the weekend I did this with my family. Sometimes they do, but it's not common conversation. But when people started losing family members in the pandemic, people were talking to each other over Zoom, not necessarily in an office.
Mhm.
But people suddenly said, I'm sorry, I just lost my uncle, things like that. And it allowed people to be more open to this idea of we are in this together and we're connected in this way, not just on the good, like, oh, let's all celebrate our great performance this quarter, but also in the tragedy of circumstance like the pandemic.
Ravi, I don't have choices about my bosses. I don't know how they're going to behave, but I got to bring food to the table, and I need to be emotionally happy or whatever state that you, in a good positive mind, so that I come back from work and I don't trip to my wife or what have you. So how do these human beings have to handle a boss whose behavior they have have no control about, but they have to survive. They want to live a full life. So how do organization? How do what is your secret sauce of how to handle such bosses or such environment? And you can't say, I can't bear the heat in the kitchen, so I'm going to leave it. I mean, that's not very often true with many people. But how do you handle a toxic situation or a toxic boss? Any secret sauce that you can share with us? With me?
Yeah. I'll tell you the same two pieces of advice that I've been saying for 15 years. The first is you have to understand how you yourself,
Mm,
individually different than others,
mm,
respond to stress and cope with stress.
mm,
What I mean by that is, even as young as babies that are 6 months old,
mm,
you can start to see differences in behavior
mm,
under stressful circumstance.
mm,
And we know that there are 70, 80 different brain chemicals we call neurotransmitters that are floating around in the brain, connecting neurons to each other. But people vary in which brain neurotransmitters are the dominant ones in a particular brain. There are lots of ways of describing people in categories like astrology or personality categories like Myers-Briggs and all these kinds of things. But I think it's also useful to know, well, which brain chemistry pieces are dominant. And the point about that is, hey, if I have a toxic boss, I have a bully for a boss, understanding my own brain, understanding what makes my brain feel better is
mm,
critical. And so, for example, people who are very serotonin dominant, they love the sense of achievement and fulfillment. So when they're very strong in serotonin, they are the people who love making checklists and crossing things off their list. And they love planning and executing. So if you have a serotonin brain and you have a terrible boss, find more ways to do your serotonin for yourself. Figure out ways to get more done, to kind of give yourself some additional buffer, some additional resilience against it. Other people are not that serotonin driven. Some people are very oxytocin driven, and oxytocin is the neurotransmitter we know that relates to talking and communicating. So if you have a terrible boss, find someone to talk to. If it's not in the company, find someone outside the company. Could be a family, could be a friend, could be a therapist, could be whoever, but find some. And so part of it is understand your own brain. Are you achievement driven, pleasure driven, relationship driven, calmness and peace driven? If you're calmness and peace driven, find some yoga, find some Tai Chi, find something that keeps your brain in a good place. The second thing I would say about dealing with the bosses that are difficult is creating in your organization permission to speak up. Now, some organizations, this is never going to happen, but in a lot of organizations, it can actually be hugely beneficial to just create an environment where anyone at any level of the hierarchy, if it's done respectfully and done appropriately, can give feedback, such as, I need to say something to you that may make you uncomfortable. When you just said that to me, I suddenly felt very attacked. Can we discuss this? Just simple things like asking bosses, can we discuss this? I did not, and now you might say, oh, we could not do that in this manufacturing company in this place. Okay, then so be it. But in many places, there is just a slight openness to being more direct that way. And it does require a cultural shift if we've been taught from the time we're young, don't question your elders, don't question your elders, don't speak up against anything, be quiet. And in fact, the thing that I would say is it's biologically part of our species to speak up. How do I know that? Because kids cry. A 3-month-old cannot tell you what's wrong, but oh man, if something's wrong, they cry. And so it's inborn in us to voice our need. Now we get scolded and told, don't do it, be quiet, sit there, don't say anything. And that lesson sometimes from family, sometimes from school, sometimes from early work experience is taught, be subservient, be quiet, don't ever question anything. But I think we've shifted in the global civilization that it may make the manager uncomfortable, but I think we are getting closer and closer to the idea of saying, if people feel mistreated or if people feel unrecognized or if people feel this is too toxic for me, we're allowing people to say that now. Now, maybe that'll shift. Maybe it's a pendulum. Maybe we'll go back to a more punitive culture in 10 years. But for right now, globally, we've been talking, broadly speaking, in the market-based economies about the great resignation and how people are just by the millions leaving jobs. But, in many places in the world, they're not leaving office jobs. There's just, their basic survival, and they're doing whatever they can to pay the bills and have a roof over their head. But again, the pandemic shifted this because even the things that kept people reasonably resilient in their jobs were their friends, their colleagues, the other people they saw at work. And now when you have more isolation, it becomes even harder.
Ravi, this brings me to this question. In as much as we talk across that leaders, the valor and vulnerability, okay, we're bashing them up right, left, right, and center, valor, vulnerability, blah, blah, blah. But isn't it equally true with the subordinates being vulnerable? They feel vulnerable that should I go and expose myself to the boss? You are restricting yourself to go and speak to the boss. So in as much as you are saying the boss should come down, why aren't you going up?
Yeah, again, there has to be a culture set by the top leaders that says we have openness here. We function in an environment of honesty. So if things are great, we're going to tell you this is great. But we have to have, and and people should feel, wow, that's great that we have that honesty. But we have to have honesty about when things are not great, both operationally not great, processes not great, technology not great, but also human behavior not great. We have to have that honesty and the ability to speak up and point out that things could be improved. And that will make everybody uncomfortable, from the frontline person up to the senior manager, to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to go to work sometimes and hear something that I don't want to hear, but it's part of the ongoing evolution of the organization towards better performance and greater ability to be resilient and last into the future.
Okay, I think because this is something that I have to chew, digest, understand it. So a couple of three little.
I'm sorry, I just want to add one thing. And I when I've seen it work the best, it's because someone on the board of directors demanded a more honest culture. You can have one individual mid-level manager try to advocate for it, and there can be great benefit. There can be one small unit within a broader company that's really demonstrating it, and that works great. But when someone on the board says, we're going to follow the path of these 10 companies that took a more speak up culture, let this more direct, honest approach come in, where people felt safer and there was more ability to pinpoint problems early. That's really lean culture, right? Identify problems early, change the processes, even if it's not better for one person, but it's better for the system, reduce the waste, which may make some people's jobs different. That's part of the honesty required for lean and Six Sigma to work. And I think it happens most effectively when someone on the board becomes the champion and says, this is the way this company is going to go.
Yeah, thanks for leaving Hopkins and Harvard and coming to us. But tell me one thing, just give me three suggestions that you think the leader should do, and three suggestions that the colleagues on the lower hemisphere should do to absorb whatever is in for them, negative or toxic thing. I mean, just 2, 3, whatever you want to. Just as something that people can think about. 3 things that the leader should do, and 3 things what the junior colleagues should do to absorb something that they don't have the power to change.
Yeah. So the first thing I would suggest for both the senior folks and the frontline folks would be to welcome the idea of 360 feedback. So 360 feedback it's more of a US term, although I think it's more global now than it used to be. And it's the idea of get a third party to collect feedback from every source. So that's what makes it 360.
Yeah.
Get a customer, get a superior, get a subordinate, get a peer, and ask them, how is Jayanti doing? And everybody contributes to that conversation. And so when Jayanti gets her feedback, she can say, okay, this is collectively based on all the different sources. So there is that. The second thing that goes with that, I would say, for both the senior and the frontline, is this idea of being open to the direct speak up feedback approach. I need to tell you something you may not want to hear. This particular behavior is impacting me this way. An example is, and then the invitation, can we discuss this? The leaders at the hierarchy, at the top of the hierarchy, The other thing that I would tell them that they need to work on as a skill set is learning to communicate in things other than numbers. Because the leaders love scorecards. The leaders love KPIs. But you can overdo it. If you have 37 numbers you're checking, you can drop the word key. They're not key anymore. There's 37 of them. They're just indicators. So learning to communicate in other mechanisms like storytelling, like humor, like empathy. Those things, if the leaders can learn to communicate in that way, it improves the whole organization. And then the frontline group, I would say the thing that becomes really part of the lean culture is see it and say it. What you see, don't keep to yourself. You see a problem, you see something that could be improved. In the lean culture, it does no good. It's wasted insight. It's wasted intellect if you see it and then nobody hears about it. When you, as a frontline person, can see something, then you have to say something, which is very hard, right? And if you fear the boss or you fear the supervisor or you fear the manager or fear the executive, again, it's part of everybody has to do their part to it. But those would be sort of my key suggestions. Feedback, 360, speak up culture, learning to communicate in more than numbers, and then see it and say it.
One of the things that you said during our conversation is that if you are inclined to a certain structured way of working or certain way that you want to be more friendly, which is not being conducive, then you need not get stuck in the organization. You can do it in an informal group or take it out outside the organization and fulfill that sort of a requirement of yours. Have I captured you right when you say when?
Yeah, I mean, one of the exercises I'll do with groups is a simple grid exercise where I'll say, okay, tell me what your needs are. That is, and generally people have the same 10 or same 20 needs. I want someone to talk to when I'm lonely. I want someone to reassure me when I'm sad. I want someone to laugh with at the end of the day. I want someone to join in my hobbies, like playing cricket or watching basketball, whatever it is. You get your needs listed, and then on the opposite axis, list who does it for you. So is it family? Is it spouse? Is it coworkers? Is it the boss? Is it the customers? Is it students that you teach? And just sort of say, oh, you know what? I don't get much compliments and praise at work, but I get those needs met because I do our community education for children on good sports skills or something. And so, hey, I don't get a lot of praise at work, but I get a lot of praise over there. Or I don't have many people to talk to about things at work, but I have plenty of support at my temple or my whatever. And just identifying, okay, I have all these needs. They don't all have to get met at work. Maybe hopefully one or two get met at work, but then where is my particular constellation, if you will? I get this need met here. I get this need met here. Family does this for me, but it doesn't mean that family has to do it for everybody. One person may get a lot of humor in their family, but somebody else may get more humor from work. So as long as the needs are met, I'm sort of agnostic about who cares where they get met, as long as they get met.
Yeah, because there's a lot of talk about, they started with the abbreviation, and I did not even know what it meant because I did not even understand when my son wrote ASAP. I said, what the hell is it? I thought it was some sort of a drug because I was in the pharma industry. And now suddenly when I was doing the Zoom and all that, they came up with a concept of RFP. I said, what the hell is RFP? So I asked somebody, I said, what do you mean by RFP? He said, respect for people. I said, oh my God. Why can't you say respect for people instead of using this acronym? So, and then they said, because Toyota has in the Toyota way a pillar called respect for people, so we should have respect for people. I mean, you give me your take on that. I mean, let's hear you talk about what is this respect for people. I mean, respect their work. This I don't know. I leave it to you. What does respect for people mean?
Yeah, I
Sorry
mean,
for that.
we talked about this earlier. These are not things that can be faked.
Mm,
You genuinely care about people, people know that.
mm,
And I don't care if you put it on posters all over plants in 7 countries, with smiling faces and big capital letters, respect for people. If you can put that on all the campaign slogans and posters, but if people go to work and say, my boss is a jerk and my boss is undermining my sense of self,
mm,
it doesn't matter how many campaigns and almost in a way it makes people feel even worse about the company.
mm,
Oh yeah, they put all this stuff up there about respect. They don't respect me. It's almost that the disingenuous, the
mm,
discontinuity between what the poster says and what the real experience is
mm.
even worsens that uh, feeling of how bad the company is.
I loved what you said. Honestly, I love what you said because that should be really driven home, and I'm sure people will be waiting to hear you say this. Honestly, I think it's overstretched. And as you really said that, okay, that is such a dream that you built, and then the actual action is really 180 degrees from what you have been preaching.
I'll tell you, and I'm controversial when I say this, and I understand that not everybody will agree, and that's fine. It's the kind of thing that's good for debate. But if you said to me, where should we start with our change program? Should we start top down? Should we start bottom up? My controversial position is start in the middle, because you can have wonderful executives who are 12 of them in a room, and the men and women in that room are so motivated and so inspired, and they want to really run the company so well, and they come up with beautiful paragraph mission statements about how beautiful it'll be. But if the mid-level manager is still obnoxious, a bully, does not care about anybody, they'll go, whatever, about whatever the senior people are saying. And the frontline people won't think anything has changed.
I love
If
what you
you
said because, in the management jargon, and I'm sure you know about it, it is called the frozen middle. So,
frozen middle.
so you
Exactly.
decrease the middle.
I always feel like when people say, like, okay, so we want to do a big cultural change, we want to apply principles of emotional neuroscience, change our culture,
Mm,
create this destination type employer where people, fight to come in here because it's such a beautiful culture. Those are great. How do we do it? And they always think, oh, are we going to do something for the top 12? Are we going to do an offsite
mm,
retreat? I'm like, maybe.
mm.
And then they're like, oh, should we do something for thousands of frontline staff and bring everybody? I say, yeah, I don't know. And they're like, well, what should we do? I say, I need dedicated time, meaning entire days with the mid-level. And people say, oh, we can't do that. But that's what ends up being effective.
I love
That's what,
that. I love what you're saying. I'll tell you why I love that saying is that once they are into it, at one point of time, they are going to be the leaders, right?
right.
At one point of time, you're grooming them to be your leaders. And if they get involved and they get the basic essence of what is respect, what is love, how do you drive by compliments, etc., then at one point of time, when they move up the hierarchy, that spirit will flow down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they right now today
mm,
are the ones interacting with
mm,
the front line. In
mm,
some ways, in some places, they're also the ones who may have some customer contact.
mm.
And so you really are getting the most maximal impact on the whole organization's culture if you can change that mid-level.
True. I mean, I love you for saying that because they are the people who can be a buffer or cushion from what abuses. I'm using the wrong word, but doesn't matter. I'm getting recorded. It doesn't matter. Is all the blah blah that you get from the top management? If this buffer they can use as a buffer to absorb all the thing that is negativity that's coming, and they are going by figures, and I absorb it, and I don't see that it's percolated down the line. I think you said it. I think those are the magic words for me. Defreeze the middle, right? I love what you said.
There, this is not my uh, expertise or um, language, but there are a lot of people who now who I hear using the term unbossing.
Mm,
And unbossing is to get out of the mindset of
mm,
walking around scolding people to do better, and instead, asking, how do I make your situation better so you can perform better?
mm,
And taking less of a hierarchy view.
mm,
But it often comes down to that middle.
mm,
You can do unbossing from the very top senior managers,
mm,
but if the individual worker, the 10,000 workers still come in and fear their supervisor, it doesn't matter if you've got very beautiful poetry coming out of the very top. People, if you ask them, tell me about the leadership of your company, they may not even know the name of the senior vice president of the such and such unit, but
mm,
they know their supervisor's name.
mm, mm. I love what you said. I'm not getting, there's no way that I can stop asking you questions, but then I can't take all your time. Tell me one thing. All this, what you're doing, all this, what we said is possible. I know it's possible. How much of help they require from an outside agency? How much can be done inside?
I mean, you've got to have somebody internally who's committed to it.
Mm,
Because even if you get the best support externally, if
mm,
there's nobody inside who's really a champion of it, just like with Lean and Six Sigma,
mm,
you can bring in the best trainers and so on. But if there's nobody internally who really wants it to happen,
mm,
you know, it really is, you must have an internal champion for whether you're doing operational excellence or emotional excellence. You've got to have an internal champion who really owns it and feels this is something I want this company to do. Um, and then in terms of external partners, I mean, I think it depends a little bit on the industry you're in and whether it's service oriented or innovation oriented or pure production facility type things. Because when I work with companies that are very customer facing, that is, there's daily customers coming into a retail location of some kind, then emotional skills on the frontline level are critical,
mm,
because every day the brand, every day the experience of the customer comes from the emotional skills of that cashier or the emotional skills of the person they're interacting with. If it's more of we deliver a product or a software or whatever, the manager's emotional skills become everything, because they're the ones driving completion of the projects on time, at cost, and so on. So, it's a little bit different in each organization exactly what they need. But, I think a lot of it has to still be driven internally by someone who champions it. And if there's nobody inside who wants it, uh, external people can never achieve results.
Ravi, if I can capture what you said, and I hope I can retain everything what you said, but let me just close my eyes and remember what you said. Drive by compliments, the genuine part of it, 360 degrees appraisal. If you are a person who have their requirement, If the internal people are not being able to support it, try outside sources to get that need satisfied. The other one is that when something you're not happy about, you should be able to go to the boss and say that I'm not happy and get an engagement or appointment, but I want to talk to you about it.
And not just complain, but actually engage in conversation.
Engage in conversation. And one of the other things that I really love what you said is, I mean, I'm using my terminology. What you said is the people who can really make or do something is the middle level managers who, I mean, you just defreeze them, give them, and they are the persons who will be able to drive your company forward. I hope I have captured most of the things. If I missed out, I don't know.
Oh, that was great. That was great.
So I'm going to read your book on Sunday, and you promised me before Christmas you're going to come back again to me.
Okay, I will.
Love you for that, and I'm going to stop recording. And that was a lovely session.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.